Imagine 800 pounds of muscle and steel accelerating to 20 miles per hour. When a medieval heavy cavalry charge hit an infantry line, the kinetic energy simply shattered the ranks. For centuries, warfare operated as a highly exclusive club. Society was rigidly divided into estates, and the actual business of fighting belonged strictly to the wealthy nobility, the so-called estate that fought. To understand why, look at their defense. A full suit of interlocking plate armor rendered the wearer practically invulnerable to the pitchforks, clubs, and basic iron weapons wielded by common peasant levies. Absolute military supremacy on the medieval battlefield was a simple economic equation. Whoever had the wealth to buy the thickest steel and the largest horses won the day. But as conflicts like the Crusades and the 100 Years' War dragged on, campaigns that historically lasted a few weeks began to stretch into grueling, multi-decade wars of attrition. The financial burden became crushing. Replacing elite warhorses and paying the exorbitant compensations demanded by aristocratic knights began to bankrupt monarchs. Desperate for manpower and completely out of gold, kings and smaller states were forced to look downward. They began pulling the lower classes directly into the ranks as professional soldiers to fill the gaps. This search for budget-friendly warfare triggered the infantry revolution, the era where the common man learned exactly how to kill the invincible knight. The first major shock to the chivalric system arrived in 1415 at the Battle of Agincourt. The English fielded thousands of lower-class yeomen armed with longbows. Because these men trained constantly from childhood, they developed the immense upper body strength required to draw the weapon, generating enough kinetic force to punch bodkin arrows straight through steel plate. The English positioned these archers on the flanks of the French cavalry, behind wooden stakes, while the heavy French warhorses bogged down in thick mud. Agincourt was psychologically devastating. A lifelong aristocrat, encased in a fortune of steel, could easily be slaughtered in the mud by a peasant holding a cheap piece of carved yew wood. But what if a state didn't have a generation of elite archers? Regions like Flanders and the Swiss cantons had to find a different way to fight back. They turned to polearms, specifically the halberd and the pike. A halberd served a brutal dual purpose. The hook was used to physically snag and drag a rider off his horse, and the massive spike was designed to punch through armor. Armed with these polearms, common infantry learned to fight in tightly packed formations. They anchored their lines against natural traps like rivers or irrigation ditches, completely denying the cavalry any room to maneuver or flank. A static, disciplined formation effectively transformed the terrain into a solid wall, forcing the cavalry charge to break directly against the pikes. In Eastern Europe, the Teutonic Knights were a professional crusading order that used heavy cavalry to conquer and colonize pagan regions across the Baltic. At the Battle of Grunwald in 1410, a Polish-Lithuanian coalition met the order with a surprising counter-tactic. Instead of matching heavy armor with heavy armor, they deployed highly mobile, unarmored light cavalry. The Lithuanians executed a feigned retreat. They engaged the Teutonic Knights, then faked a panic, baiting the Crusaders to pursue them toward the tree line. Inside the forest, the Knights lost cohesion. Weighed down by steel, they were surrounded and dismantled by the faster units. Speed, deception, and exploiting the physical stamina limits of a man in 50 pounds of armor proved just as lethal as raw firepower. By the late 15th century, all of these tactical innovations culminated in the birth of the modern professional standing army. Recognizing the shift in warfare, King Matthias of Hungary established a legendary mercenary force known as the Black Army. The Black Army utilized a revolutionary composition. Instead of relying solely on aristocrats, it featured an even, professional split of disciplined infantry, highly mobile hussar light cavalry, and heavy knights, all fighting together in mutually supportive formations. The heavy knight remained on the battlefield, but he was now a specialized tool rather than the sole arbiter of victory. Cheap weapons and disciplined commoners proved they could consistently slaughter the elite aristocracy. European kings quickly did the math. It was far more cost-effective to hire thousands of common mercenaries than to rely on the loyalty and the expense of a few hundred wealthy nobles. This shift altered the social hierarchy. In an era where fama, one's public reputation, was required for legal and business standing, military service allowed lower-class men to earn the status previously exclusive to the nobility. As monarchs began funding these professional armies directly through taxation, the old feudal reliance on landed nobles dissolved, shifting power towards a centralized state.